Hi, these are the top 10 films of 1956. When I say top 10, I mean my personal favourite films of 1956. Sorry for my appearance, but it's in the middle of coronavirus season and I've got a fever. So I've been in isolation for 11 days, 3 of them in this room. So yeah, let's get on with the list. In at number 10. Forbidden Planet. This sci-fi classic starring Leslie Nielsen in a non-comedic role.
What is it, Randall?
Is incredibly influential. It looks brilliant, it's got some wonderful ideas, it's a very sort of interesting take on Shakespeare's The Tempest. A bunch of astronauts or something go to a planet and they sort of find a wizard and there's some monster or something. It's interesting, give it a look. In at number 9, The Wrong Man. This Alfred Hitchcock thriller stars Henry Fonda as a man who is accused of a crime that he didn't commit. It's an incredibly stressful film and you follow his journey throughout it, and it gets you out angry and upset. And Vera Miles is fantastic as his wife, who takes this whole thing really badly. Yeah, it's a good movie. In at number 8, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This film is filled with paranoia, where you don't know who's a real person and who's a pod person from space who loses their emotions. It's a really great movie, and the remake is excellent as well. In fact, it kind of reminds me of like not knowing who's healthy at the moment and who's sick. You know, if you see someone coughing. In at number 7, A Man Escaped. This French film, based on a true story about prisoners in occupied France during World War II, goes into tremendous detail into one man's attempt at escaping a prison. It's really good. The only thing I think is a little unnecessary, there's a lot of voiceover, sometimes just sort of saying what happens. He picked up the glass, it was not full of water, it only had a little bit of water in it. But really good movie. In at number 6, Early Spring. This Ozu film, which again, like so many of his films, is like early spring, early summer, late summer, winters never comes, whatever. They all have these very similar titles, which sometimes makes it a little hard to differentiate between them. But this particular one tells the story of a salaryman, sort of an office worker, who has an affair, and sort of the impact it has on his relationship with his wife and his co-workers. As with so many Ozu films, it's incredibly touching and incredibly real and incredibly understated. Really good movie. In at number 5, The Killing. Stanley Kubrick's first great movie is a crime noir about a group of criminals trying to rob the horse races. Sterling Hayden is fantastic as the lead crook, and there's some incredibly great sequences. And again, it goes into tremendous detail about how the crime is going to be committed, and has a very unique structure. The film has a great sort of depressing yet funny ending. Stanley Kubrick is one of the greatest directors of all time, if not the greatest director of all time. He made some of the greatest movies in every single genre, whether it be horror, science fiction, war, and here he makes one of the great noir films with The Killing. Really, really wonderful movie. In at number 4, A Perigee To. This is the second part of the Apu trilogy after Patha Panchali, and it continues the story of Apu. He's now a teenager and living in a city. After the death of his father, he doesn't want to follow in his father's footsteps as a sort of preacher. He wants to go into education and go to college, and his mother's sort of against this because it means they will be separated. It's a wonderful story of a mother and son relationship, and much like the first Apu movie, it's heartbreaking and touching and just incredibly beautiful. In at number 3, Street of Shame. This Mizoguchi movie yet again tells of the struggle of women's lives in Japan. This is set in a brothel on a street of shame. One woman is doing it to make enough money to set up her own business. Another woman is trying to desperately support her husband, who is critically ill and very sick. Another woman is there to pay for her son to go through school, and there's also a character who's been spending time with American GIs and has a very different style and attitude to the other women. It's a fascinating movie and has a lot to say, and I love Mizoguchi's movies, and I think this is one of his best films. In at number 2, The Harder They Fall. This was Humphrey Bogart's last film, and I think it's one of his best performances. Bogey plays a down-on-his-luck sports writer. He's hired by a boxing promoter, brilliantly played by Rod Steiger, to basically create a buzz around this boxer from Argentina who is a giant but isn't actually very good at boxing. So they have to rig all of his fights. The film does an astonishing job of showing how boxers put their health and their lives even on the line, and other people make huge profit off this and are often using and abusing these people.
What's the matter with you? You got your share.
Man lies in the hospital with a broken jaw, and he took the worst beating I ever saw in my whole life. And you want me to go back and tell him that all he gets is a lousy $49.07 for a broken jaw? How much would you take?
It shows boxers with brain damage. It shows boxers who are deteriorating. It's an astonishing film, and everyone in it is spectacular, especially Bogart. And it's amazing to think that he was dying during the making of it. There's a story Rod Steiger says where he saw Humphrey Bogart crying on set, not because he was emotional, but because of the pain he was in from the cancer he had. And the performance that Humphrey Bogart gives is astonishing in and of its own, but also when you know that he was dealing with all these problems, it makes it even more astonishing. The Harder They Fall is a great movie, and I think one of the great boxing movies of all time. And in at number 1, The Searchers. This John Ford epic western stars John Wayne as a former Civil War soldier who has returned home. Soon after he returns home, his niece is kidnapped, and the film starts this 4-year journey of his search to find her. And it's driven with revenge and hatred, but above all, this movie is spectacular. John Ford loved shooting in Monument Valley, and he never captured it more beautifully than he did in The Searchers. It's breathtaking, and it's hugely influential. David Lean watched The Searchers repeatedly before making Lawrence of Arabia to figure out how to shoot a desert landscape. The most famous shot of John Wayne walking through that door. Oh, I can't wait until I can walk out of a door. Right, so counting down the top 10. In at number 10, Forbidden Planet. In at number 9, The Wrong Man. In at number 8, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. In at number 7, A Man Escaped. In at number 6, Early Spring. In at number 5, The Killing. In at number 4, Perigee To. In at number 3, Street of Shame. In at number 2, The Harder They Fall. And in at number 1, The Searchers. Well, that was my list. What are your favourite films of 1956?